Exactly 1 week ago, Sunday last week, we lost two of the greatest personalities in the world. Shnei Ziknei Hador, two of the great Rosh Hashivas. Rab David Soloveitchik, Rosh Hashivas Brisk Yerushalayim, and Rabbi Yitzchak Steiner, Rosh Hashivas Kamenetz. And these two Gedolim were especially familiar to American Jewry. Many of your children learned in Brisk. Hundreds of young B'nai Torah Americans went through Reb David's yeshiva. And Rav Steiner was actually an American growing up almost 100 years ago in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So they both were almost 100 years old. And very few people are zeicher to be 100 years old. So many of us would just smile and say, well, nobody lives forever. So why are you so sad? Why are you? But Chazal teach us, kosher silukim shel tzadikim kesreifas beis Elokeinu. And tzadikei hador are not just great teachers of Torah. It goes beyond that. They bring Shechina to us. In a way, the Shechina dwells on them, on their homes, on their surroundings, on their Talmidim. And I think when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, nobody asked, how long did this structure stand? How long did this house stand? 400 years and more. Well, houses aren't expected to stand forever. But the Beis HaMikdash wasn't just a house like any other. It wasn't just a structure. It was a Beis Mikdash. It was Beis Hadoim Raglov Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was where HaKadosh Baruch Hu dwells and His Shechina dwells. And we hoped it would be with us forever. And the same applies to Ziknei Hador, to Tzadikei Hador. Yes, as human beings, they were very old. But we need Shechina. And they bring Shechina to us, and they bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us. So it is a great loss. And I don't want to talk about the lumdus and the greatness of Torah of these two great Rosh Hashivas. I just want to talk 2 minutes about the tzidkus and the tahara and the tamimus and their purity. So I didn't know Reb David very well. I never learned him Brisk. And he wasn't a very engaging, talkative person. But I have many Talmidim that learned in Brisk. And even though the many years divide between me and the Brisk Rosh Hashiva, but we do have shared Talmidim. And some of my most precious Talmidim were Talmidim of Reb David. And one of the things I heard from them, which to me was so moving and so unique, is not about his Torah, but rather about his tefillah and his tmimus. He used to cry like a little child by almost every Shmoneh Esrei. And where did he cry? Not by Refuenu, not by Baruch Aleinu. So I know some people, their Shmoneh Esrei is all about Baruch Aleinu. When they ask for penas and they ask for money. Where did Reb David Soloveitchik cry? In Berchas U'Avaydo. V'sechazenu eineinu b'shuvach oletzion berachamim. And Yom Tov, Musaf umepnei chatueinu golinu ma'atzenu. That was the climax. He used to sob like a child and his body used to tremble. So that is something not only uncommon, almost unique. One of the biggest struggles for our generation is Tzipiso Yeshua. For thousands of years in Golus, Jews were mitzapa Yeshua. They knew what it means to be a Jew between Goyim. They knew persecution, they knew torture, they knew pogroms. 80 years ago, the Holocaust, which was the greatest Jewish tragedy in the history of the world. Ma'az hoiso Yehuda lagoy. And almost every generation and almost everywhere. So our generation lives in a relatively period of calm. We have equal rights in most free countries. I know American Jews are very concerned about the rise of Semitism, but still it is nothing compared with what our forefathers knew in Europe. So it's a big nisayon, tzipiso li Yeshua. The brisker Rosh Yeshiva was mitzapa li Yeshua. And Rabbi Yitzchak Sheiner also, such a pure tzaddik. And what was so unique about him was Nafka ben Adam Lachaveroi. He grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, almost 100 years ago. It was not like what it is today. And as a child, his parents, who were not great Gedolei Yisrael, but they didn't let him visit any home of his friends, only one home. And that was the home of the Pittsburgh HaRav, Rav Zilberberg, who was a Ger HaChosid. That was the only home that Yitzchak Sheiner visited as a child. My son-in-law, Beinish Rosenbaum, is a grandson of the Pittsburgh HaRav. And many of you know him because anybody that learns my Torah must know Rabbi Rosenbaum. He's my right-hand man in Torah. So the tshuvas are right, and the shurim I give, nobody's more bukir minchas Osha than he is. And anybody that needs my tshuvas turns to him. So he's an enikel of the Pittsburgh HaRav, and he told me that once he met Rabbi Yitzchak Sheiner at a simcha, and he introduced himself as an enikel, a grandson of the Pittsburgh HaRav. He hugged him, and he kissed him again and again, and he was so overwhelmed and so happy to see an enikel of the Pittsburgh HaRav. He was more like Ahavas Abrias and Ahavas Yisrael, and I have enikel learning in Kamenetz. And when he passed away, little children, but they cried. They couldn't get over it because every encounter, he was so warm and radiated so much Ahavas Yisrael. I was shocked to see how moved and how hurt my little eniklach were children and young yeshiva bochum, and how they davened before he passed away. So it's a great Aveda for Klan Yisrael. They should be Melitza, Yosher. And to our dismay, they were old, they were ill, but they ultimately passed away from COVID-19 and from Corona, which once again proves, yes, they wouldn't live forever, but they passed away from COVID-19 and chaval. And if not for this disease, and if not of somebody ultimately causing them to get infected, b'derech hateva, they would be with us. Kodesh Baruch Hu has his ways. But we do learn in Perek Gimel of Masechet Avos, Hakol Safui, v'harashus nesuna. Everything is predestined, but we do bear responsibility for what we do and for our shortcomings as well. We should only hear Besoidus Toivus, Refuas, Yeshuas, and Achamis. So the topic we'll be discussing today is Noshim, the Mikra Megillah. Da'adom Adalaf Masechet Megillah, Om Rebbe Shul Ben Levi, Noshim Chayos Ben Mikra Megillah, Avhen Hoyu B'Yoysenes. So we find the same principle in the Shabbos Chav Gimel Adalaf. Once again, Rebbe Shia Ben Levi, Noshim Chayos Ben Chanukah, Avhen Hoyu B'Yoysenes. Once again, Psochim Kuf Ches Avadalat Dalat Koises, Noshim Chayivas Vadalat Koises, and once again, Morad Shmaitz Rebbe Shua Ben Levi, Avhen Hoyu Ba'oisei Hanes. Most of the Rishonim, starting off with Rashi, Ritva, Or Zerua, Meiri, all say, Noshim Archayiv B'Mikra Megillah, and therefore Isha could be Moitzi Ish. Both have the same chiyuv. Taisvis twice in Shas. Both Megillah Dav Daled, Erech Dav Gimel, quotes the halachas gedolos. Even though Noshim Chayos Megillah, nevertheless, a woman cannot be moitzi a man. And why is that? If both are chayiv, afenoi b'yosenes. I want to quote 5 svaras from the Achronim. And today's shir is a test study. Many times in my shurim, I just express how amazed and how much I love Terosin Shel HaRishonim because of its pashtus and glattkeit and yashus. Not that the great Achronim aren't important, chas v'sholem, They gave us the Geschmack and learning and Perpula Shel Torah. But there's a difference between Taras and Shalosh and today's sheet is a stark example. So if Noshim are Chayavos, the Mikra Megillah, why can't they be Moitzi Anoshim? How do we understand the Halachas Gedolos? 5 Drochim, more or less in chronological order. Starting off with Turei Even, the Shagas Zarya Turei Even, and we spoke about this Turei Even last week's year. Anoshim Chayavim Medivrei Kabbalah. Noshim are only Chayav Medivrei Seifrim at a later stage. And just as a Drabonan cannot be Moitzi D'Uraisa, Mishachayev Midrabonan and Moitzi Mishachayev Medivrei Kabbalah. And the Takon of Anshe Knesset Zagdoila, Mordechai HaYehudi Bebeis Dinoi, was only on Anoshim and not Anoshim. So he's not a Yochid. We find the same svara in Shalosh Shuvas Binyan Shlomo, Reb Shlomo HaKohen Mevilna. Reb Shlomo and Reb Tzal were 2 brothers. Roshei Beit Din Rabbe de Vilna, 100 years younger than the Shagas Zarya, I think a bit more than 100 years. But in Shuvas Ben Yishua, we find the same. Rebbe Kiva Eger quotes the Turei Even and disagrees with him. Last week we spoke about the Turei Even, and I said last week, it's a gewaldige chiddush, mehei chetayse. Pashtus Loshen Reb Shua ben Levi. Noshim chayovas memikra Megillah, av hen hoy beisenes. It's the same chiyuv, because both were part of the same nace. So why would there be a difference between Anoshim and Noshim? That is the Turei Even. We discussed it last week. I don't want to go over it once again. Avnei Nezer, Taf Kuf Yud Aleph, says a gewaldige chiddush. And he says, actually, a person is mekayim the mitzvah of Schilas Maseh Amalek with Mikra Megillah, because Haman was a netzer, an enikel of Amalek, and only men are chayiv in Schilas Maseh Amalek. Women are exempt from that mitzvah, and that is why Mikra Megillah of men include more than Mikra Megillah of Noshim, of women, and that's why Isha is not Moitzi Ish. This Avnei Nezer is such a gewaldige chiddush, and it's very far-fetched. To say that we're mekayim the mitzvah of Schilas Maseh Amalek with Mikra Megillah is already a gewaldige chiddush. I don't want to be marchiv about this. I think one of our coming shurim will be about actually Schilas Maseh Amalek, and maybe then we'll come back to the Avnei Nezer. But the fundamental assumption that we're mekayim the mitzvah of Schilas Maseh Amalek with Mikra Megillah is already a gewaldige chiddush. But even if we accept that chiddush, still, but we have a separate mitzvah of Schilas Maseh Amalek, and that is the Kriya of Pasha Zohar. Mikra Megillah is about Persumei Nisa, not the nes of Melchemes Amalek, but rather the nes of Mordechai ve'Esther. So Yoytze Maseh Amalek, but that's not what Mikra Megillah is about. So why can't the issue be Moitzinish? En advom misyashvim al alev, or Sameach, similar to the Avnei Nezer, but not the same. Your Sameach is usually glatter than the Avnei Nezer is a big mefalpo. Or Sameach in the beginning of Hilchos Megillah says, how do we know that by Megillah we need Kriya metoich haksav? Hadvorim niskorim benasim, schoire zois zekorim besefer, gzera shova zekorim zekorim. And zekorim besefer, niskorim benasim, besefer. And it's from here that we learn, so the Or Sameach says, zekorim besefer, shtayit ba Maseh Amalek. Noshim are not mitzvah in Mechias Amalek or in Schilas Maseh Amalek, only Anoshim. So only by men do we need Kriya Meter Cheksav. Noshim don't need Kriya Meter Cheksav. And once again, this is so far-fetched. All we learn from Ksoi Zoi Zekorim B'Sefer is that Zekorim means Al Yedei Sefer. Why would it make a difference whether Noshim are Chayev in Schilas Maseh Amalek? We don't learn Megillah from Amalek. We learn Zekorim from Zekorim. That Zekorim means B'Sefer. But even if we will accept the Or Sameach, and my argument with Or Sameach is the same style, the same binyan, the same structure, as what I just said a moment ago about the Avnei Nezer. Okay, let's assume the Osamech is right. But still, so why can't the Isha be Moitzi and Ish? These are only details. So an Ish needs Kriyam Terchiksav, a Isha doesn't need Kriyam Terchiksav, so why would that make a difference? Why can't the Isha be Moitzi and Ish? Marcheshes. Marcheshes was one of the great Gedolim in Vilna, together with Reb Chaim Moiser. Reb Chanach Henech Eigish, Simachov Beis, Shuvas Marcheshes. Marcheshes says, why don't we say Halal and Purim? The Gemara in Megillah Daf Yudalet, Kiyusa Zu Hilula. So actually, with Mikra Megillah, with Yoitza Halal. And Noshim Chayovim B'Halal. Noshim not, because it's a Misaseshas Mangrama. So men need to be Yoitza Halal with Mikra Megillah, but women can be Moitzi men with Halal because they're part of Halal. That's why they can be Moitzi with Mikra Megillah. Lanias Daiti, when the Gemara says Kriyusa Zu Hilula, it doesn't mean we're Yoitza Halal with Megillah. We cannot be Yoitza Halal with Megillah because Megillah is not Halal. Halal is Halal and Megillah is Megillah. Halal is Prokim and Sefer Tehillim. Megillah is not Halal. It's not only that Megillah is not Halal. Megillah doesn't even have the essence of Halal. Megillah is a story. Visu Loi. And the entirety of Megillah says that there's not one posuk of Halal, Hoidoya, Shir, Shevach, not one posuk of gratitude, of thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So how is one Yoitza Halal with Megillah? To me, it's a milsa de pshita. Kriyosa Zuilula means we're potter from Halal. Because the Megillah is instead of Halal. It's not we're Yoitza Halal with Megillah. Chazal, we're not metakan Halal and Purim, because we have the Megillah. And when we read the Megillah, Chazal assume everybody's heart will be overfilled and will overflow with Hoidoya and Halal. And that is why we don't have a mitzvah of Halal and Purim. So the interpretation of the Mecheshes falls as well. Number 5, and this is an amazing Chiddush. And now I'll tell you a secret, which I don't think anybody knows, but it's an interesting observation, and I'll try to give it carefully. Hilchos Chanukah, Mishnah Brura, Tov Reish Ayin Hey Sif Koten Tes. Mishnah Brura quotes Shas Tshuvas Oiles Shemuel that a woman doesn't have the din of Mahadran El Kol Echad V'Yechad. And therefore, when the husband lit ner Chanukah, the minig is that Noshim Madlik. The hider of Madlikin Ela Kol Echad V'Yechad is only a Noshim, not Noshim. However, if a woman wants to be Madlik on her own, she could say a brocha, just like she says a brocha on Mitzvah Sasei, Shazman Groma. B'nei Ashkenaz, there are more paskins, that women could say a brocha on Mitzvah Sasei, Shazman Groma, the same ner Chanukah. And I never understood this Mishnah Berurah, this Oiles Shemuel. What does it have to do with Mitzvah Seishas Mangrome Memanavshach? If she was Yaitza with her husband, Neresha Beisai, then she was Yaitza. If you're already Yaitza the mitzvah, it's definitely a brocha of Torah. Has nothing to do with Moshe Mitzvah Seishas Mangrome. You can't say a brocha on a mitzvah after you were Yaitza the mitzvah. So it's a brocha of Torah. And if we assume that because she wants to light on her own, she was not Yaitza with her husband, then she has a chiyuv me'ikar adin. Even according to the B'Yosef, that woman would not say a brocha mitzvah seishas mangroma. She definitely would say, because she's chayiv, she wasn't Yaitza with her husband. So what does this have to do with mitzvah seishas mangroma? Reb Shimon Zalman tries to explain, so let me share with you a secret. The Mishnah Brura didn't have a big bookcase. He had very few sforim. He did not have Shalas Tshuvas. I think when he decided to write the Mishnah Brura Shulchan Aruch Chaim, he achieved the Sifrei Yesod, the basic sforim on Shulchan Aruch Chaim, which include HaRav, the Graz, definitely Chayodam, Yeshua's Yankov, Mogen Geborim, Mama Mordechai, and all the other Sforim and Shulchan Aruch, which he quotes all the time. Whenever the Mishnah Berurah quotes Tshuvas, he took those quotes either from Pischei Tshuva, which is not printed on the Shulchan Aruch, only in Yoredei, it's a different machaber. It's a very small sefer, Chad Megedoy Lalita, or from Pischei Olam. Pischei Olam is a sefer of Doiv Ber Karasik, who was a Rav in Krulovitz, in a town in Lithuania. I realized this about 15 different sources in Mishnah Berurah. When he quotes the Binyan Tzion in Shloich Monos, he quotes the Shoyel HaMeishiv. He quotes Tov Kuf Nun Daled about the cholera pandemic, the Divrei Nehemiah, the Tzemach Tzedek. Whenever he quotes Shalos Teshuvos, most of the time, he saw those quotes in Pischei Olam. Sometimes he writes at the end of the paragraph, Pai Ayin, or Pei Tov, meaning Pischei and Pischei Tov, but not always. The Mishnah Berurah did not see the Oiles Shmuel, because Kichsovoi v'chel shoinoi, this entire section of Mishnah Berurah is a quote from Pischei Olam. I think if the Mishnah Berurah would see this, Oiles Shmuel, he would not quote him, because he says, Emilsa de Tamiyah. What does he say? So the Pischei Olam quotes Shalosh Teshuvos Oiles Shmuel. Noshem Achayev b'ner Chanukah. Afen hoya b'yosenes, but it's a lesser chiyuv than men. It's only secondary. It's a lesser chiyuv than anoshim. And therefore, when there's a man in the house, noshim are poter min Chanukah. Not because they're yoitzu with nerish beisa. They're poter. The chiyuv of noshim is only when there's no man in the house. L'shitosai, says the Oiles Shmuel, if the husband lit ner Chanukah, the issue has no chiyuv at all. So the question is not what she yoitza with her husband, was she not yoitza, she doesn't have a chiyuv. So it's like a mitzvah to say shazman grama. According to the Ramah, she could light with a brocha. But the etzem chiddush, such a strange chiddush. Mehechet teisa, to assume that the chiyuv of a isha is secondary, and when there's a man at home, there is no chiyuv. Why not? Doesn't she have a chiyuv of persum and issa, just like all the others? So this comes back to what I said before. Afen hoya b'yosenes. L'chayr enoshim and enoshim are the same. Why would be memachalik? So let's move forward. According to the Oiles Shmuel, he talks about ner Chanukah, that it would be the same by Mikra Megillah. So the chiyuv of enoshim would be secondary to the chiyuv of enoshim, and maybe that would explain the halachas gedolos, that isha cannot be moitzia ish, because the chiyuv of the men is far greater than the chiyuv of enoshim. So that would be explanation number 5. But as I said before, my feeling is if the Mishnah Berurah would see this Oiles Shmuel, he wouldn't quote him. It's too much of a chiddush. But the Mishnah Berurah was matak the Oiles Shmuel from Pischei Olam, milah b'milah, word by word. And the Pischei Olam brings a lot of Shalos Teshuvos, and he wasn't really medactic. It's not Sodas Nakia like the Mishnah Berurah. So anyway, Chamesh drochim meraboseinu ha'achronim. But let's see what the Rishonim say. Tosfos, in both sources, Erech and Dav Gimel, Megillah Dav Galed, Tosfos clearly says, according to halachas gedolos, the chiyuv of noshim is of a different nature than the chiyuv of anoshim. Anoshim chayiv b'kriyah, noshim chayavos b'shmiyah. It's a different nature. Yes, same nace, same story, same Megillah, not the same mitzvah. Men have a chiyuv of mikra Megillah. Noshim have a chiyuv of shmiyah. It's clear in both Tosfos, and not only Tosfos, the Rosh and the Ran and Megillah on the spot. Mordechai, Megillah, Siman Tov Shin Ayin Tes. And the Bahag himself, in the Bahag says, men are chayiv b'kriya, and a woman chayovin b'mishma. Mishma means shmiya. And why is that? So in Minchas Osher I wrote, it's poshut. Anoshim are boki b'kriya. Women are not a boki b'kriya. Especially in days of yore. Many women, noshim tzidkoniyos, great tzedekos, couldn't even read Lashon Kodesh. Moiri Verabi, the Heilige Rebbe of Tzanz, Kloiseborg, the Divrei Yatzev, used to tell many times that the mother of the Bnei Yissaschar couldn't even daven in a siddur. She didn't know Lashon Kodesh. She only said Tchinas and Tze'ena Oreno and Korban Mincha siddur. You know what the Korban Mincha siddur is with Ivrit Haich. And they were Noshim Tzadkoniyos. The Mogen writes, Mogen Avram, Kuvav, and Hilchos Tefillah writes, Nashe Didan, don't daven Shmoyne Esrei. The Yoitz Tefillah with Moida Nila Fornecho in the morning. Especially Megillah, which we need to read with Tamim, and Noshimar and Boki B'Tamim. So the Chiv L'Chatchila and Noshim is only Shmiya. So a woman can be Moitzi and Ish, because a woman isn't Chayiv B'Mikra Megillah, and that is the Chiv of a Noshim. And that is Pashtus. That is what we find in Toises, Imran, in Rosh, in Mordechai, and in the Halachos Gedolos himself. So why do we need Chidushim and Pilpulim when the Rishonim are so pushed? There's another approach, another interpretation, quoted by the Mogen Avram Sivkot Nei, Mishnah Berurah Sivkot Zayin, Tov Reish Peites, Mishum Kavoid HaTzibur. And that is another approach that we find in the Rishonim. It's not Kavoid HaTzibur that a woman should be Moitzi Anoshim. Some Rishonim even write, Kol Be'ishu Ervo. So this Mahalach we find in Eshkol, Kolboy, Orchos Chaim in the name of the Bala Itur, Kol Be'ishu Ervo. There's no issue in hearing a woman speak, but I think Kriyas HaMegillah with the Tamim is like music. Tamim are like music. So it's either a problem of Kol B'Shever, or at least it's not quite the Sibir. So these are the two different approaches. My nafkamina, Nusach HaBrocha. The Ramu writes in Tov Reish Pei Tes Siv Beis that when women are Yoitza, they should say a brocha, Lishmoya Mikro Megillah, not Asher Kedushonim B'Mitzvah Tzurah Mikro Megillah. So there are more paskins in accordance to those of the Shonim that say it's a different chiyuv in essence, in nature. And that is why Noshim Einam Mitzias Anoshim. And this is very, very pushing. Both drachim that we find in the Rishonim are beautiful in their pashtus, in their yashas. But he also quoted 5 different mahalchim and drachim that we find b'divrei Rabbeinu Achronim. Sfas Emes and Megillah has an interesting argument, and he says maybe the machlokes between Halachos Gedolos and all the other Rishonim that disagree with Halachos Gedolos would depend how do we define Afen Hoya B'Yoysa Nes, and that's the machlokes Rishonim and Psochim Kufches. Rashbam writes, Hanes Nasa Al Yodom. So at the beginning of the shir, I quoted 3 different sources, Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Dalet Koises, the Rashbam says, B'schus noshim tzidkoniyos negalu aviseinu mimitzrayim. It was the women in the forefront. It was in their merit that we were zoichet to Dalet Koises and Dalet L'shoim Shel Geula. Nes Chanukah al Yedei Yehudis, Nes Purim al Yedei Esther HaMalka. And that is Afen Hoya B'Yoysa Nes. Tosis disagrees, and Tosis writes, the Loshen Afen Hoya B'Yoysa Nes means they were saved, they were salvaged. Their life was in danger, just like the men were in danger. Comes along this Vasemis and he says, according to Rashbam, women stand apart. It's not the same chiyuv as Anoshim. Ikar and es Nasal Yod. So maybe their din is a different din. According to Tosfos, they're the same as men. So why would they have a different din? So the Halachos Gedolos understands like the Rashbam. And that is why the chiyuv of Anoshim is different than the chiyuv of Anoshim. Tosfos l'shitosoi. Afen Oya Beisanes means they're the same. So this Vasemis is nice. Misyashav Alev. Ein bo kol hechreach. Why would it make a difference? Especially after we see Divrei HaRishonim. Has nothing to do with the understanding, the interpretation of Afen Oya Beisanes. Anshe Knesset Agdala were Mechayev Anoshim B'Kriya because they are B'nei Kriya. They were Mechayev Noshim B'Shmiya because that is the best they could do. Or Mishum Koid Siva, Mishum Koid B'Sheva. So has nothing to do with how do we understand Afen Oya Beisanes. So I never feel comfortable disputing Achronim. But the Beis Yosef is against this Vasemis because when the Beis Yosef explains Tosfos Shitta that Noshim could be Moitzi Anoshim. The Beis Yosef says, why can't they issue Moitzi Ish? To the contrary, Ikar Anes Naso Al Yodom. So the Beis Yosef clearly explains the opinion of the majority of Rishonim that women could be Moitzi men, and Tosfos proves the point, Ikar Hanes Nasa Al Yodom. And that is the shit of the Rashbam. Lo ke divrei Asvasemis, hefech divrei Asvasemis. And therefore, I think this machloikis, whether Noshim could be moitzi, and Noshim stands by itself. And it doesn't depend on anything else, stands by itself. Either Mishum Kvod Tzibur, or Mishum their chiyuv is a different nature. It's a different mitzvah. Zeh v'chiyuv v'zeh v'shmiyah. Most of the Shonim maintain no. It's the same. Noshim achayev b'kriyah just like a noshim. They can't read, so shomei kaina. Just like noshim achayev and all the other mitzvahs shevet dibur. Not all of them. Not kriyas Torah, but mikra Megillah yes, because Afen Oya Beisanes. So. The Brisker Rav also has a chiddush on Afen Oya Beisanes. But the Brisker Rav, like everything from the Brisker Rav, so misyashev al halev. Givaldik. I started today's shiur with Rav David, with the last son of the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav was not only one of the Gedolim of his era, he was a giant. He was unique in many ways. So the Brisker Rav, not in Grizal Rambam, but in the stencil on Masechet Erechim, the beginning of Erechim, the Brisker Rav asks a question, a chakira. How do we define this word of Afen Oya Beisanes? Does it merely take away the limitation of Noshim Pturos Memitzvos Aseh Shas Mangroma, or it's a new type of chiyuv? Mitzad ha'etzem, Noshim should be potter of Mikra Megillah because it's Zman Grama. Afen Oya Beisanes is like a new chiyuv. Or does it simply say, in those mitzvahs that are Persum and Issa, and Noshim were in the same nace, there is no Ptur of Zman Grama. And the Brisker Rav stresses what an afkaman would be, lagabe eved, shechayev mitzvahs ki'isha. The Oiles Shmuel that I quoted before, in a way, is similar to the Brisker Rav. Afen Oya Beisanes is a din b'fnei atzmai. But the Oiles Shmuel is far-fetched and the Brisker Rav is not far-fetched. Because the Brisker Rav doesn't say that the chiyuv noshim is lesser or greater than the chiyuv anoshim. The question is just the nature of the chiyuv. Is it the same or not? So the Brisker Rav deals with the question and he brings various different nafkaminas, lididei, and he wants to explain the halachas gedolos. If Afen Oya Beisanes is a geder b'fnei atzmoi, that would explain why noshim cannot be moisi anoshim. So I want to put the Brisker Rav into that same category I started off saying 5 drochim of achronim. It's actually 6 drochim of achronim. And even the brisker of kvoidoi b'mkoim munach. But in the Rishonim, we find 2 different drochim. In the Pashtus and the Yashtus of Rabbeinu HaRishonim. And both drochim are more practical and not lamdish. So I'm a lamdin, and I teach lamdis since many, many years. Oh, how many years? Yeah, at least 45 years since I was started being marbitz Torah barabim. It was a year after my chasana, when my great Rebbe told me I gotta be a magid shiur, and I objected, and I said, I just got into koilel, and he said, "Du bist nicht for koilel gemacht. You're not for koilel. You need to teach Torah." So yeah, lamdis is lechem chuki, but not everything is lamdis. Not everything is lamdis, and sometimes the pashtus of Rishonim, like in our case, as I explained, Toisus and most Rishonim understand the halachas gedolos in a very practical way. Anshe Knesses Agdola Mordechai veBeis Dina were Machayev Noshim b'Shmir, because that's the best they could do, and Noshim b'Kriya. And because the mitzvahs of a different nature, Eini Shemotzias Ish, other Rishonim maintain, Mogen Avraham, the Mishnah Berurah records both drochim, Kvoid Hatzivu, and maybe to the extreme, Koil be'Ishu Ervo. And those are the 2 drochim. So the halacha, the minig is, when a person learns Megillah in his home, and the Noshim make the brocha on their own, they do say Lishmaya, Mikra Megillah, and we are machmir, Kishitas halachas gedolos, that Noshim should not be moitzi on Noshim, even though most Rishonim maintain they could, but Lechimra, we are machmir Kishitas halachas gedolos. So I hope today's shiur was a fascinating shiur. To me, it definitely is fascinating. So much to learn about today's shiur, and I hope you will enjoy and have a beautiful evening. And we should be zoich in the schus of Talmud Torah derabim, only on brochas and yeshuas and nechamis. Refuah shalem kol choin am Yisrael, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should watch over us. We should know no more loss, no more tragedy, no more COVID-19. Mishenechnes od amarbim besimcha. Kodesh Baruch Hu should give us simcha, and we should be zoich b'korov to be as Mashiach Tzidkenu v'simchas olam al roisham b'mheiro v'yomeinu amen.